We're good to go.
All right, very good. Welcome to the March 16th, 2023 meeting of CB6 Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, Chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 this evening. We're joined by CB6 Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. Reminder, New York State law requires all community board members to have their cameras on, first and last names displayed until the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards the quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. There's time following the committee's discussion. We'll field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take minutes or the meeting summary tonight. So if you're able to do so, please raise your hand through Zoom. And of course, you're all familiar with the Doodle sign-up sheet, which can be utilized for future months. Do I have any volunteers to take minutes or the meeting summary? All right. Seems like nobody wants to take the meeting summary. So otherwise, I'm gonna come back to that in a moment. But we can take the roll call first, and then we'll determine we'll pick a victim for the meeting summary.
I took the notes last time. If you want me to take them again, that's fine. I'll just be exempt for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to have a variety of committee members. Everybody's going to have to do it at some point. So if you're able to do so, we only have 2 agenda items tonight, and it really shouldn't take more than 10-15 minutes to write up. So, Stu, I mean, if nobody else volunteers, I'm happy to let you do it again. But for the rest of the committee, we really do need participation from everyone.
So shall I proceed to the roll call?
Yeah, you can proceed to the roll call.
Okay. Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser.
I appear to be here.
Okay. Eric is absent. Sadie is absent. Steve O.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
Ann Seligman.
Present.
Lou Sapersky. I don't see him. He appears to be absent. And Seema Shaw.
Present, and I'm happy to take minutes if no one else wants to do it.
Okay. I can send the minutes, the materials for the minutes after the meeting tonight.
Sounds
Tomorrow
good.
morning.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, is that everybody, Brendan?
Yep,
Okay.
and we have a quorum.
Terrific. And thanks again, Seema. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office, is now on the screen before you. There's no objection. We will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda is adopted. Right. The meeting summary from the February 16th committee meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office. There's no objection. We will adopt the meeting summary as drafted. If you object to adopting the meeting summary or have any corrections or changes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Okay, looks like we're good there. So the meeting summary is adopted and will be available on the CB6 website soon. Ground rules, no one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you wish to have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. Again, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state information, stated right information that was already stated loud on the record. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you. You can unmute yourself. And again, cameras need to be on for committee members, and first and last name must be displayed at all times. Brings us to committee business here. We have 2 items on the agenda tonight. We'll start off with the Assembly and Senate bills, which deal with a non-religious treatment option, or at least informing defendants of their right to complete alcohol or substance abuse treatment in a non-religious treatment program. We're also joined by Jackson tonight, and let's see here. What Stu, I know you had you sent a bunch of materials over. Do you want to lead the discussion on this one?
So you're muted.
Yes, Stu, you're talking.
People prefer me that way. So we're joined by Jackson Fisher Ward, who is, I believe, the Chief of Staff, right, with Assemblymember Epstein. So why don't you just introduce us to the bill and explain why we need it?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Stu. Getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know if that's from you, Stu, or
Probably
let's
somebody
see.
got their volume.
That's perfect. Yeah, so first of all, thanks for inviting me. Like you said, I'm Jackson. I'm Assemblyman Epstein's Chief of Staff. I'm actually a former liaison, as Brendan will know, to Community Board 6. So nice to be back again. But yeah, so the origin of this bill is we had been having some discussions with some individuals who were, in favor of just maintaining the separation of church and state. They're advocates for secularism. This is an issue that we've seen happen in New York State and all across the country. Instances where defendants in drug cases, or as part of whatever case there's a drug element, are mandated by the court to attend a substance use treatment program. More often than not, when people think of that, they think of something like Alcoholics Anonymous, which has a religious component. Not to say whether that's good or bad, but rather that everyone has the right, if they're mandated to attend a substance use treatment program, to attend one that is in line with their personal beliefs, be it a Christian belief system, any other belief system, including a non-religious belief system. So often what we have seen, there's a lot of cases, both in New York State and at the federal level, where atheists have been forced to attend Alcoholics Anonymous, not given another option by the state. And what they do is, when they're aware of their right, is to basically, sue and make sure they get another option made available to them. So the purpose of this bill is to kind of stop the problem before it starts by making sure that defendants actually know that they have a right. This is your right under the First Amendment, right? It's an Establishment Clause issue. So everyone already has this right. Not everyone knows they have this right. Sometimes when people don't know they have this right, but find out they had this right, they go and sue to affect their rights. So the idea is to stop the problem before it starts, make sure people are getting into programs that actually match their beliefs, because we know that's a much more effective way for people to treat substance use issues. So unfortunately, we passed this bill last year. It was passed in both the Senate and the Assembly. It was sent to the governor's desk. In an 11th hour veto, she struck it down. We're trying again this year. The bill's been reintroduced already. It's moved in the Assembly from the Codes Committee. I believe it's now sitting in the Ways and Means Committee. We expect it to be reported and then voted on soon. And we also expect the Senate to do the same. So we're going to take another pass and see if we can convince the governor to do the right thing and sign the bill this time around. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions if folks have them, whatever you like.
Could you start by explaining the governor's veto?
I wish I could. It was sort of confusing to us because if you read the message, which I shared, it basically says we don't think it's appropriate for defendants to know their rights. It was a really silly position to take because, you know, part of the court's job is to explain to people what their rights are. Obviously not crossing the line to advocating for a defendant, but it's important that people know, you know, what rights they have when they're sitting in a courtroom. And, you know, this is just like, if you were to get arrested, you would be read your Miranda rights. We inform people what their rights are. There's nothing controversial about that. She seemed to take issue with, you know, that. And we think that, you know, we've had more conversations with her staff and tried to do more education, and we're more hopeful this time around that she'll change her position.
Miranda rights are controversial, but this passed the both the Assembly and the Senate with overwhelming numbers. It seems to be a pretty popular bill. So the challenge here obviously would be to get past the veto a second time. Do you have any reason to believe that her objections will change?
Yeah, I mean, we've been, you know, trying to have more conversations with our staff. Particularly, we've been trying to have conversations with OCA, which is the Office of Court Administration, which, you know, would basically be in charge of, you know, operationalizing this to some extent. So, you know, we're trying to address their concerns to the best of our ability, but also just, you know, making sure that we are much louder on the advocacy side of things. And I think like the politics here are going to be important. We just need to make it, you know, very difficult for her to say no a second time. There was recently an op-ed, I don't know if everyone saw it, I'm happy to share it, in the New York Times that was actually talking about the governor's, you know, misplaced veto on this bill. And I think the worse it looks for her to veto the bill, the better chance we have of her not doing that, basically. So we're focused on just building, you know, sort of a wide base of advocates that are going to be contacting her and making it a pain for her to say no to this the second time around.
Okay, and I'll just ask one more question and then get out of the way. This is a public safety committee. So who are the defendants who are potentially being subject to a program that may not be beneficial to them? And how does that help the rest of us? In other words, you know, what danger do these defendants present to the rest of the public? And why do we care that the treatment program be effective?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess, you know, if we believe that our criminal justice system has a rehabilitation element, which I do, and the Assemblyman does, we do, you know, it's important that that piece of the that piece is actually effectuated by making sure that defendants are placed into programs that they're going to stay in and be successful in. And that, I believe, would be quite difficult for people who are, you know, may hold different beliefs, you know, maybe are secular or just don't believe in a higher power, which is what Alcoholics Anonymous often refers to. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just not suitable for everyone. And so the goal is just to make sure that you know, people are matched into programs that align with their personal beliefs, because we know that that means they're more likely to stay in the program. It's more likely to be effective for them.
All right. We have a couple other hands up. Let's go to Anne, followed by Brendan. And you're muted.
I am sorry. Yeah, I mean, to me, this seems at first glance like a no-brainer. Of course, it's like programs are going to be way more effective if they do align with, like, if you go in and get preached at, it's like it's just not going to work if you don't believe in the higher power any more than whatever. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get into the whole, like trying to conversion thing, but I always try and be a devil's advocate, and thinking about New York as a pretty big place, there are a few things I thought about as a concern. And one of them is, are there parts of the state where there just really aren't a lot of options other than, AA or, other religious, you know, things like religious organizations that are rehab oriented?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And another one of the things we know is most effective when people are in substance use treatment is, the ease with which they can attend those meetings. So that means making sure that those are, close by to wherever those people are staying. So there are actually, fortunately, a great deal of secular options throughout the state. We were working with an organization called Smart Recovery. It's one of the biggest secular treatment entities, and they've got programs across the state. It was one of the things that the assembly staff wanted to make sure we addressed, and so I think I maybe even provided it to Stu, a list of all the programs. So yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, there are a lot of options for folks, fortunately.
Cool. So, and okay, so my second kind of question / comment is that I thought, like, I read Hochul's veto thing, and I just thought, like, you're mixing apples and oranges here. I'm not a lawyer, but it did kind of seem to me like what she was saying is that this is going to give people rights to refuse other things because of their religious beliefs. And I don't see how in the text of the legislation it does that at all. But I wondered if maybe that could be clearer. And I'm thinking of that partly because as Stu asked about why isn't she just going to do this, like veto it again? And it's great if you kind of give her an out, right? Like you can kind of give her ways like, oh, this is what's changed, and so now I'm okay with it. So I don't know what.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think she's kind of like making a slippery slope argument in her veto message, and she also, as she says in the memo, that these defendants already enjoy these rights. The problem is they just don't know about them. Right. So when people are sitting and they're incarcerated and they go to the law library and start to learn about their rights, they're going to sue you. So it's just like, I don't know why we're not telling people, we're stopping the problem before it starts. We're not exposing the state to, lawsuits. We're not wasting time in courtrooms that, we don't need to be in, when we could just make sure people know they have an option, because that's their right, and then send them off to a treatment program that's going to be effective for them. And, so they don't come in contact with the criminal justice system again.
And that actually kind of answers my third question, which is kind of anytime you add a requirement or a regulation, like you're adding a little bureaucracy, a little cost. But it seems like in this case, it there may well be, like a really strong benefit for that cost in terms of, compliance. And people not, people actually successfully going through rehab. One thing though, I did wonder is because the language of the text, like it says something about like being, they need to be notified in writing. And I maybe didn't look deeply enough, but does writing include, like email, like, does it have to specifically be writing? Like, would a text do it? Like, is there some way that we can make it, again, effective, that they will actually learn this? Because if they are getting a piece of paper in the mail, they, first of all, may or may not get it, because these are people who may be a little bit, there may be a little bit more movement in like their habitation. So it may like an email may be more stable, or a phone number. So if the legislation could reflect more notification options, that seems like that also might be more effective.
Yeah, I think how we envisioned it working is for the the court, meaning that the judge would ask the defendant while they're sitting in the courtroom when the sentencing is happening, and that exchange is going to be on the record, and that I think would satisfy what is being asked in the bill.
Well, knowing how literal some of our Supreme Court justices are, perhaps the legislation should say something about communication rather than, in writing.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Happy to take that back. I can relook at the bill and see where, if and where that could fit in.
I mean, sorry, because I know it's already like passed and I don't want to
No, I mean,
but
there's really, there are things can be endlessly amended even after it's gone out of committee. There's still opportunities to do that. So always open to hearing suggestions for edits to the bills.
Cool. I'm done now. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Ann. Brendan?
Yeah, I just wanted to flag for both committee members and members of the public that I have put into the chat a link to Governor Hochul's veto, just so that people can see why the governor decided to veto the bill. So feel free to look at that.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And to, as far as the veto goes, I would just, kind of along the lines of what Ann was just asking about, is there a way that we can, accomplish everything and, maybe there's less of a burden on the courts, Jackson? I mean, it seems like that was her last point there, that the courts are overburdened and this would just be more work on them. I mean, so maybe there's a more efficient way to notify them to the point where it's not a strain on resources.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we're going to be discussing with OCA, the Office of Court Administration. We'll see kind of if they have suggestions about how they think the burden could be minimized, although I guess our position would be we don't think it's very burdensome. I think what's probably more burdensome in the long run is, not letting people know that they have this right, and then we know what happens when they find out that they do. And I've said it multiple times. So I think that would be our counter argument. But of course, like there's always going to be a back and forth discussion. Often what happens is, a bill could pass, both houses. And then there's an opportunity for, the governor to seek an amendment at that stage, called a chapter amendment. And then we agree, both houses of the legislature and the governor's office, for her to sign the bill with an agreement that another bill in the next session is introduced that amends the law that we passed. So that could be a potential option. I wish that she had come to us earlier, last year and tried to have more of a discussion about the bill. But I think, because of the election and kind of ran out to the last second, she just had to, decided to veto it. So I think we're more hopeful this time around.
All right, yeah, hopefully, well, we support, I think most of us support the initiative. I think it's just, you don't want to give her any other excuses to put us right back in the same situation. Stu?
I found her veto message somewhat mangled, actually. It sounds like she's worried that this will cascade into a court having to notify people of other rights pertaining to non-religious treatment or programs. Do you have any idea what she could be referring to?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not even sure that whoever dashed this memo off at the 11th hour really knew. I think they're kind of grasping at straws. But yeah, I'm really not sure if she had anything specific in mind at all. Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Jackson? Would anybody like to take any action based on what we heard?
Such as a resolution?
Mhm.
I would move for resolution, which I've drafted.
Oh, was that draft shared with the entire committee? No, I don't think. So I know there's some. I also have another draft resolution. So hopefully next month we'll get on a cadence of the 3 days ahead of time at least. But for this month, the changes happened last week, so we're just gonna have to adjust. If there is a second, we can consider a resolution. Anne? You're on mute.
I will second the motion to support this legislation with the suggestions that have been raised.
Okay. Are there any objections to the suggestions? I'm seeing none, then we'll
I'm just sorry, just
Go
to
ahead,
quickly comment, just for the sake of the minutes, I don't think I understood what the suggestions were.
And do you want to summarize in a bullet point or two?
Yeah, actually, like the main thing really was about changing the notification in writing to saying something more broadly about communication. That's the only real additions to that I think might.
But I'm not
have
sure
had.
that's restrictive in the way that you're interpreting it.
That
so
writing is not. You don't think writing is restrictive?
Are we talking? So are we saying writing in the sense that the court has to deliver a letter, a printed letter?
The legislation currently says writing, and I am concerned that it's possible a court would interpret that to say like, oh, that wouldn't include text or email. It means USPS. And so, like, I think I just would want to recommend that the legislation maybe says something about writing includes, the term writing should refer to all commonly used methods of
I think you're overthinking it, and that's my take on that. I don't actually think that the way you're interpreting it is how anyone or even the whole court system would, but I know Stu has his hand up.
Okay, I overthinking is like one of my strong suits.
Well,
Yeah,
one of my
I
weak
just
points.
wanted to say, and that's a suggestion that that Jackson can take back to the office. But from our perspective, in terms of a resolution supporting the bill, I think we can support it either way. And it can be up to the legislative office to decide what language would be most successful.
Yeah, I don't think we need to elaborate further on the definition of writing. I mean, as far as from what my take on it, it could be, as simple as a written notice being posted on the wall. And that would cover writing. So I don't want to get into, I hate to say this, but I would assume that the court would know how to best communicate that, that it would not have to be spelled out in a resolution. But so I think we can I think we can refer to it broadly enough, or we're not. There might be other more modern forms of communication, but I don't think it should be a major point of contention here.
Oh, I would hope not. This is my first meeting on this committee, so I would hate to have anything be contentious.
Well, welcome aboard, Anne. We're happy to have you. So yeah, if I don't know, we can play with the language later, but I think we're all on the same page here that we want what's most efficient and meaningful. So, Jackson, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I actually just had a comment to make. So I actually just pulled the bill up. I just wanted to take another look. I actually don't see language in the bill other than the title of the bill that requires the written notice. Sometimes the bill drafters inject things into the bill's title that don't actually reflect what the bill does. So this seems to me to be one of those instances, because when I read the text of the bill, we don't say anything about written notice. In the section right before the part that we're amending, and I don't know if anyone has the bill up, but in section 2, subdivision 5, that's old law that exists currently that talks about the defendant having to agree on the record or in writing to abide by certain release conditions. So I'm not sure if that's why it says something about written notice here, but what we actually if you go look at the bill online, everything in green is what we're adding, and we've said nothing about written notice being required. It's just prior to the defendant being referred to a substance use treatment program, the court must inquire on the records. That happens when the judge and the defendant and the lawyer, if they have, are all sitting in a room together, and that just happens on the record. So I'm not seeing that in the bill, but it makes me want to go check with our bill drafter exactly what you had in mind. So thanks for raising it.
All right. Thanks for the clarification, Jackson. I guess I think we can figure this part out offline, that it's not pertinent to the essence of the bill and the overall message. So the motion had been made and was seconded with conditions, but I think they're insignificant enough that we can proceed to a vote unless anybody objects.
I'm sorry, can I just understand, what are we voting on now? The resolution text has to be presented before, we're going to vote on the text next month, right?
Yeah, it's only very recently that draft resolutions have become more of a thing, but oftentimes we would vote on a resolution to support a piece of legislation, and the text would be ironed out after the fact. So if we want, we can look at the draft reso and make any tweaks. Otherwise, we can vote on straight.
I think under the new bylaws, we can only vote on the text. Isn't that right, Brendan?
Brendan will have to chime in. My understanding was draft resolutions are preferred to avoid that. So if we have it, great, but it's not necessarily a requirement, as I understand.
Okay, yeah, so just to chime in when it comes to what the bylaws now say about, about draft resolutions. It says, and I am quoting here, the committee chair or representative shall also present draft resolutions proposed for adoption by the board. Draft resolutions shall be presented in writing whenever possible, with sufficient specificity to facilitate clear understanding of the facts, supporting the resolution and the actions called for by the resolution. Unless time sensitive, draft resolutions presented should be presented at least 3 days in advance of the board meeting. The same standard applies to resolutions presented at committee meetings. The exception is if a resolution is deemed to be time sensitive, which, is a judgment call for the committee chair and the committee as a whole to make.
All right. Thanks, Brendan. So I guess the question is, do we want to look at the draft now, or do we want to put this back on the agenda for next month when everybody can review it ahead of time?
Also, just procedurally speaking, I should note that there was already a motion made and seconded. So
Nice.
unless the motion is withdrawn by the person who made the motion, there is still that motion on the floor.
Could we just ask Jackson, when do we think action would be taken on this?
I think so. June at the earliest is what I would say.
So that's fine. So I'll withdraw the motion and we can present this for the next meeting. And that, I think, clears everything up, right?
Yeah, next meeting. So if we do that in a month from now, then it would come before the full board in May, which would still be in time for June. Up in Albany, right? So is that how we want to handle this? Okay. So seeing that the motion has been withdrawn, we will reconsider in April. All right. And then the draft resolution will be distributed to the committee ahead of time.
And then it comes before the full board in May, right? And so it's ready for June. So
yeah, and that seems to work with the timeline.
Is that right, Jackson? That's fine.
Yeah, I think that's probably a safe bet. I doubt that it would be acted on sooner than June. One thing I just wanted to mention is the bill numbers have changed, so I can send those new numbers to you if you don't already have them by email if you want to.
All right. Yeah, we'll update the bill numbers, make sure that's reflected in the draft that's circulated to the committee. So thanks, Jackson. I appreciate the commentary and walking us through the legislation, and we'll get back to you next month with the outcome of the resolution.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me, and thank you for considering doing a resolution as part of the bill. I hope you all have a great night.
All right, too. Thanks. Take care.
Right.
Talk soon.
Care. Bye.
All right. So that brings us to agenda item number 2. Continued discussion of shelter security at the new Providence Women's Shelter, 225 East 45th Street. So not much new to report. We have Pat Hill from Councilmember Powers' office with us. We had heard from the 17th precinct last month. And again, the main stakeholder here, not at the table, is DHS. Unfortunately, they again decided not to come. Again, scheduling conflicts, you name it. Be that as it may, they're not here. So So I do have a draft reso. Unfortunately, apologies, it was not distributed ahead of time, but I've been out of the country for a week and just got back to learn that you guys had changed the bylaws. Just bear with me this month. This is a time sensitive matter anyway, given that there was a homicide. So I scribbled some points on paper. This is by no means a final draft. This is merely a work in progress, but I wanted to give us something to work with. First, before we dive into this, I guess we'll go to Patrick, who can kind of sum up his end of things, just as far as the communication goes, and where we need to go from there. Patrick.
Hi. No, thank you for having me. Hope everyone's doing well. Would have loved if we could have had a representative from DHS here. As Matt and Brendan are both aware, we've been also trying to simultaneously coordinate with DHS to try and have them send someone to attend as well. And that, unfortunately, as Matt explained, has not been fruitful. I'm sure you guys are aware of the letter we drafted and sent at the end of December in the wake of the tragedy. And, we sent that to Commissioner Jenkins in the city and asked that they restore the shelter security to NYPD run security, given that, we've heard from constituents that it's been night and day from when DHS security was handled by NYPD to when now it's handled by a private security contractor. And we heard the testimony last month. I wasn't at the meeting, but I did take a look at the meeting afterwards online and saw, the testimony from the 17th precinct and leadership there about the increase in calls and the increase in, and just the sheer amount of responses they have to out of all the, I think there's 4 shelters in the 17th precinct, and out of the 4, I think 66% of all calls came from New Providence. So that's concerning, to say the least. But yeah, we sent the letter. We've been following up rigorously and trying to get an answer, written response from the Department of Homeless Services. We have not gotten one as of yet. And we hope that, they get back to us soon with a plan of action to address this, because it's now coming on 3 months, as Matt's said. And, we're only seeing an increase in the issues. We want to see something to try and address and, flatline this so that it doesn't continue.
Pat, does anybody have any questions for the council member's office before we continue our discussion? Anne?
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't realize I was not muted. I'm just curious, like, what recourse do we have as a community board, as a council member? Like, what?
I've spoken with the council member, and he's talked to some higher ups. There have obviously been some changes in leadership, as we heard from our normal contact, Leilani, earlier yesterday, and that has resulted in the lack of ability to appear, before the community board, but also the lack of response or reply. It's not that they've said that they haven't worked on it; it's that they haven't finalized, and we haven't gotten any sort of official plan or response to our inquiry. So we're eager to hear what they have to say. Obviously, this can be a discussion if they have other plans or other ways that they think that they can address these issues. I'm sure we would all be open to hearing that. But so far, we just have not been able to get someone to attend, which is unfortunate. They are a very inundated, agency. It shouldn't be lost that they're dealing with the migrant crisis still. They are dealing with the, housing crisis that still exists in the city and is ongoing. So it's definitely an inundated agency, to say the least. And, I feel for them in that regard, but there are some questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, I know there's certainly a lot going on over there. But I mean, end of the day, we need to make sure our shelter facilities are safe for the clients and the community that surrounds them. So that's why we're continuing this discussion on, hopefully this will be the third and final month that we're discussing this. Stu?
Just for clarification, is it NYPD that we want to take over security, or is it the DHS's own peace officers?
Yeah, so yeah, DHS police, or peace officers as they refer to them, was the agency that had the shelter up until early 2021, or fiscal 2021, when there was a $25 million budget cut across the citywide. So they are, I believe they're peace officers, but they have arrest capability. So it takes the end result is it takes a lot off of NYPD's plate.
And
Inside.
we know they're not responding to us. Do we know if anything has changed at the shelter in the last 2 or 3 months?
I mean, based on what the inspector told us last month, that's really the only update we have is the DHS police came in there for about a week after the incident, and then they left. It was good for about a week, and then it was back to the same old. So really nothing's changed. With the leadership shuffle at DHS, there's just, they may have a plan in place or they may have some ideas, but if there's nobody there to sign off on anything, nothing's going to happen. So I think we just got to keep pushing and pushing until it gets to their attention. Steve?
Two-part. You did say the security come from DHS's own resources, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. In a kind of a desperate measure to find any type of data, I noticed that the DHS does keep track of performance across provider agencies. I believe New Providence is Project Renewal. I wasn't too clear if Project Renewal is providing their own security practices or if they lend that service out to someone else. But I've noticed the only bit of, is Project Renewal providing their own security, or have they sourced that service out to someone else?
I don't know the name of the company with the contract, but I know there is a contract. So I'm not sure what information you're looking at, but
so
yeah.
The information I'm looking at, although dated, does mention that DHS keeps track of performance tiers of provider agencies. Not much more information I can see from this. It's a 2011 third quarter report on the performance tiers across adult shelters. And for the New Providence one, Project Renewal has many facilities varying in different performances. Again, not knowing what performance tiers specifically means, but the one at New Providence ranks it as second performance tier. So I don't know, since DHS is not providing a meeting, does it help if we lend ourselves to ask questions? Where does New Providence fit in terms, what is the performance tier, and where does it lend, how do you on how New Providence is performing? Because obviously security is an aspect, public safety, but you know, how often do they observe the performance of these locations and the providers?
Yeah, I mean, we've been asking for all kinds of information. I mean, mainly, what is their response to the tragedy that took place 3 months ago? Actually, yeah, 3 months ago this date, exactly. And I mean, we've heard absolutely nothing. So I mean, I know there's data sets out there, but I mean, if they're time stamped, I mean, there's, obviously, if we're looking at 2021, 2022 with the new provider. So I don't know, and obviously, I think most people are familiar with the expansion that's taking place there to better serve everybody in the future. So there's a lot of moving parts there, but as far as, I mean, a knife was used as a murder weapon, got through the security screening with metal detectors, no explanation there yet. So I think I mean, as much as the agency has been unable to attend our meetings. They've had 3 months now to provide us written responses. And they've said that they're willing to do so, but they haven't. So, all right, I see we have a few hands up. We'll start with Seema, then Patrick, then Ann. Seema?
Yeah, I'll just say that, I don't know, Stephen, like what data set you're exactly looking at. I will just say, with my experience working in city government and, generally with DHS, is that those performance documents are meant to be like an overall whole scale assessment of how each of their vendors is like managing the space. So it's not, there might be like a small kind of allocation in terms of like the qualitative analysis related to security, but it's really like, how many programs are they providing? How many beds are they providing? Like, you know what I mean? Like it gets so much bigger and broader than that, typically. So while there might be some reference, it's not like a huge tool for us to use. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Seema. Patrick, you have something else?
I was just going to add that, with these questions that we have, I know that, our contact Leilani had said that if we could provide questions for them, perhaps ahead of time for next, there's a list of questions that we have. I think maybe if we could compile all of them and, send it along to the contacts that we have that are within leadership, so that we can have, at least some of those questions out there in writing, and then hopefully either get those in return before next month's meeting, or if they're able to send someone to answer, at next month's meeting with those answers to the questions that we ask.
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep pressing on. Even if we pass the resolution tonight, we'll keep pressing off. I just don't want to take up the committee's time month after month.
Absolutely.
No results. So we'll keep pressing. If the minute we get an email response, we'll certainly get it out to the entire committee for review. So, but again, don't hold your breath. It's been 3 months, and they've said nothing. So, Ann?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I live on 46th Street, so I'm like literally the block between New Providence and the Vanderbilt Y, which, obviously like also has a shelter. And I'm just, it feels like a lot more of the complaints are coming from New Providence or coming about New Providence. And I'm just wondering, like, I'm not sure who does the security at the Vanderbilt Y, but maybe there's some fix there where there can be, like, I feel like there's overlap in my life of those two institutions, and maybe they should be working together also.
Yeah, that's a fair point. The VRC runs the Vanderbilt Y, and we haven't heard any major complaints from that facility. I can say, off the record, I can't elaborate too much in a public setting, but some of the anecdotal incidents that I've reviewed over at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza in the surrounding area, involving, some assaults and some different crimes like that, were traced back to New Providence.
Right. And of course, the Pops on 46th and 2nd has been closed like forever. So that's kind of out of the picture. And so I think that sort of compresses things as well. But I just wondered if there might be, like, it just is interesting to me, right?
Yeah, and maybe in the resolution we don't necessarily we say DHS police or another qualified provider or something along those lines, because I don't want to say that there aren't other private security companies that will do a good job. Because we have no issues up at 53rd Street at the men's shelter. We did years ago, but not recently, and it's certainly not an internal security issue. So there are other providers out there, but I know that given the clientele in the women's shelter, there is definitely there are a lot of alcohol and substance abuse issues that take place there. So definitely need top-notch security. So
But making our other reso even more relevant, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that can happen here. But unfortunately, since DHS is not at the table, we just have to, put forth our best statement, and hopefully, if it's not followed through exactly, then maybe it'll be a conversation starter. Once the agency heads read the resolution. So, Seema.
Yeah, Matt, I'm looking, I think we can bring up your resolution if you don't mind, because one thing that struck me was that when the precinct representative last month talked a lot about the lack of de-escalation strategies that were implemented, and that could have, he seemed to imply that there was a lack of that type of training and effort made, so that it went from 0 to 180 very quickly. So I'm just curious if that's been incorporated. I thought that was interesting, training around de-escalation tactics and whatnot as well.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. I didn't put that into this thing just yet, but maybe I think that should be a whereas somewhere in here. I don't have access to edit it right this minute while it's on the screen, but yeah, I would say that that's something that we should say. Whereas de-escalation training is critical to
for the staff, because in addition to the security provider, right? So it's whoever's
yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. You can change people, but if they're not trained, we know that. And I'd say that that's very important. If they end up going with another private security provider, DHS Police does a great job at 30th Street with the de-escalation. So they would be trained and skilled in that. But if in the event that the agency doesn't have the funding for that, and they hire a different contract, then that is something that we would need to emphasize with them. And then one other thing that I think, Brendan, I don't know, you may have some info here, but has there been a community advisory board meeting with this shelter in the past year?
I don't know. Generally, the office does not hear a lot about most community advisory board meetings. So the best answer I have there is, as far as I know, no. But I tend not to hear about most community advisory board meetings.
Got it. Okay. I mean, that would be more Rich's committee, but we may also want to put in here that they should hold quarterly meetings, quarterly community advisory board meetings with all stakeholders to directly increase the communication, because it really shouldn't have to be a public safety committee that's putting this out there. They should be doing that on their own. They don't necessarily need DHS to do that.
Now, would that be a whereas or a resolved clause? Because that seems like an ask for.
Yeah, maybe a further resolved. Because I mean, even if they change the security provider, that doesn't necessarily mean all the conditions outside the facility would be resolved. That would solve a lot of the issues inside. But if they go out to the parks or public spaces that surround the area, I could see how some of those conditions.
Yeah. And just to note, as further suggestions are being made to the resolution, I'm trying to add the suggested changes in red.
Oh, perfect. Thanks.
So that's clear.
Excellent. Stu?
Do we understand that the reason that the crime is much lower at the other shelters in our district relates directly to the lack of the DHS officers? Or, I mean, it's not up to us, obviously, to talk about shifting, the administration of shifting officers from one facility to another, but is it pretty easily traceable to the lack of DHS officers, or are there other elements that can explain why the crime rate is higher at the shelter?
I mean, I think it's a combination. I mean, in this case, you could pinpoint it because they had different security 2 years ago, and the last couple of years it's spiraled out of control. But I think the other main factor is just the clientele. Not every shelter is going to be different. They're going to have a different portfolio of clients. Some are in need of more services than others. Others are employable and just looking for work. So I think, and some are family oriented. So I think you really have to look at the whole picture. As far as who's in the shelter, that's really going to be the main culprit as to what security is necessary. I'll tell you, I mean, there's a family shelter that's right outside of our district, and they're very well run. Security is not a main issue there. It's a family facility where parents and children live together, so you don't see those kinds of issues.
So what I'm getting at is maybe some shelters have more security needs than others, and
Yes.
they're not distributing the resources proportional to the needs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. In this case, I think it's just, we've seen so many, you might be onto something there, that maybe there is a headcount issue. But I think it's more that there are too many things falling through the cracks. There's too many disputes, too many weapons getting through metal detectors there. So that leads me to believe it's a quality issue, not necessarily a quantity issue. But we don't necessarily have to figure that out for the purpose of this resolution. It really goes back to the agency to look at review the whole situation. But I see your point there. Brendan?
Yeah, just wanted to point out that that I have added in red the additional things and the additional text that seems to have come up as people have been discussing this draft resolution. Please let me know if any of this text is not reflective of the wishes of various committee members.
I'm sorry, be it further resolved that there should be quarterly community advisory board meetings,
Yeah.
right?
That was the standard at most facilities pre-pandemic. I know resources have now shifted over to migrants, and there were a lot of temporary facilities and hotels. So even at 30th Street, they've had maybe one meeting in the past several months, whereas those meetings were occurring quarterly previously. But that really should be the standard. Hopefully, the new leadership will get the resources in place within the agency, and they can accommodate that. But I would say at a minimum, they should be meeting with the community. And the community advisory boards, for those who don't know, are generally not public meetings, but they are handpicked stakeholders in the vicinity of the shelter site. Anne, your hand up.
Yeah, I have actually exactly the same thing as Stuart, except for the previous one is that the provider of security at the New Providence Women's Shelter should be well trained in de-escalation tactics. And I think both of them should have therefores in front of them. Just speaking as an editor.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the standard. I've seen it done both ways, but I'll defer to the board on office on that one. Yeah, it's you can be redundant, or you can just it's a continued statement, so you could argue either way on that one.
Well, we have, Brendan, there's a template, so whatever the template says.
Yeah, we'll be consistent. I just want to make sure that the content is to the committee's liking. Appreciate all the grammatical call outs, but really for this exercise, I just want to make sure that everybody's good with the content and the overall statements, and that if anything is missing, that we identify it. Go ahead. Steve, you have your hand up?
Oh, sorry. Do we know what that expansion how big that's going to be. As I understand, that facility is supposed to be currently 130 clients, but how much more is it going to increase to?
Patrick, do you happen to know what the
Not
new-
off the top of my head, but I believe I do have in notes, from far back that information. I can look and connect with you offline.
Sure, sounds good. We'll get you the answer on that, Steve. Stu?
What's the nature of the community complaints? Do we have any kind of breakdown, or do we know the nature of them?
I mean, we could pull the 311 database, but it was really more along the lines of what the precinct was telling us last month. That there are a lot of disputes, allegations of assaults, that sort of thing. And then there's the community complaints. Actually, that one, speaking as a community complaints, that's more the conditions around Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. I know the Turtle Bay Association and the Friends of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza have been very vocal about those incidents. And that's where, upon my investigations with the precinct, we were able to see that it was individuals from the women's shelter. Essentially, the women here have male friends that come into the area to see them, and there's a lot of drug issues, alcohol spilling out into the public. This is the long and short of it.
I'm asking just because if it's possible, it would just help to elaborate that whereas clause just a little bit to express what the complaints are. I mean, noise complaints versus violence obviously makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, we can add a little bit more detail there. I don't want to get too specific in this, but yeah, we can say community complaints in it's really quality of life issues in public spaces would be probably the easiest way to summarize it. Does anyone have a better way to? So I would just say, whereas community complaints, including, including, you could say, including quality of life issues in public spaces, in adjacent public spaces.
And that's something that we think DHS can address by what's in our resolved clauses.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, no. I mean, will the clients be allowed to leave the facility? Yeah, absolutely. But if the disputes that occur inside the building are de-escalated properly, there's some reason to believe that people won't be fighting on the streets. I mean, I can't guarantee that that's going to be 100%, but I would say even a 20 to 30% reduction in that, I think, would be helpful. You know what I mean? It's not a perfect science. It's a free country, and people can congregate, wherever they want to. But I do think that if things don't heat up in the building, that there will be less in the way of arguments outside. I'm going to go to Patrick and then Seema.
Yeah, I was able to actually find my notes from early 2022. The new shelter is going to be increasing the bed number from 130 to 171, so an increase in 41 beds. And then I believe there's going to be 131 affordable and supportive housing units. And at that point, the population for the supportive housing had not been identified, but it would be single adults who qualify for the supportive housing.
Got it. Do you have a rough time frame for the completion?
I don't in my notes, but that's something we can definitely reach out on and try to get.
Okay. I mean, because it's probably not our committee, but I would think the Housing and Homeless Committee will probably have the people at their committee to discuss when things are ready. Seema?
I just think I was just looking at the draft. Brendan, I feel like It says de-escalation like in 2 different places. Maybe we just need it to be in one. So it's not in red, but yeah, you see it.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Sina. That was sort of a stray partial whereas from when we were
Yeah.
figuring out whether to have the de-escalation piece as a whereas or as a resolve clause. Thank you.
Yeah, that's part of the resolve. So good there. All right. Any other comments? I think there was one issue on the last line, Brendan, that I was clearing up. I think it's still a little redundant there that we can smooth out the language on the first. But go ahead, fix anything on this piece first.
Are you talking about the last resolve clause?
No. The whereas that we were resolving, that we're talking, where Stu made a comment about the community concerns, and then we tried to clarify. It's just a little redundant where it says including quality of life issues in adjacent public spaces, and then it says in the vicinity of the shelter. So we could just take out the vicinity of the shelter. I think.
There we go.
Okay. Does that sound better? Seema, do you still have your hand up from before? Or did you have another comment?
Nope, sorry. Let me take my hand down.
All good. All right. Any other feedback? Anything else that we're missing in here?
I think
I just
Anne has
wanted
her
to,
hand raised.
yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
just want to let you know that I put in the chat the reso that has the details on the New Providence redevelopment from, I think it's like 2021, but the link is there. So if people want to see the details.
Oh, thanks, Anne. Appreciate that.
I do have just one more comment, Matt. I just put my hand back up.
Sure.
Should we
Go ahead.
just mention, that we're in support, and I'm sorry if it's in here and I just missed it, in support of the letter, the council members letter?
Yeah, I think that would be fine to add to strengthen that, because
Yeah.
that letter was actually sent, within days of the incident. So I mean, I think the fact that we're trying to strengthen the argument with that. It's also kind of calling them out, saying it's been 3 months. How come we haven't
Exactly.
at the council?
Yeah.
Brendan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a stylistic note. Does the committee want to also include since, if the committee wants to mention the letter in the resolve clause, does the committee want to mention something in a whereas clause also about the letter that the council member sent?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, that could also, that could be, I mean, that probably, we already have like, 3 resolve clauses here, so maybe that should just be a whereas council member Keith Powers on December, whatever, 2022, sent a letter request.
It was December 19th, if that helps.
December 19th. Thanks. December 19th, 2022. I don't know that. Yeah, I guess the date, the timing of the timeline here is important. And that was to the commissioner. Was that the same? There have been leadership changes.
Oh,
So they did confirm.
if it also helps, at the time it was Commissioner Gary Jenkins. It's now Acting Commissioner Molly Wassow Park.
Okay. But they did confirm receipt of it, regardless. It's in the hands of whoever's in those roles today, correct?
Yes, they confirmed receipt, but we just have not gotten an official response.
Okay.
And I place it right below the whereas on DHS not coming to
Yeah.
our public safety committee.
Yep, there's a theme there. All right, I think we have pretty good template here. There might be a couple tweaks, language or grammar. I think the overall pretty good. I mean, if we now that we have some of the figures that Patrick quoted and found in the resolution, the previous resolution, we might be able to expand on the expansion project, but I don't know that it's particularly relevant at this point. Actually, on the first resolved clause, we just need to fix the language there where it says urges, when we added or another qualified provider, we've got to change the word restored. DHS police was in there, so if they were to be put back in, that would be restored. But if they choose another provider, then restored would make sense.
No, I think it's fine. I think it expresses our intent clearly.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
All right. That's fair.
Yeah, I for one don't think we need to necessarily go into the expansion stuff just at this point, especially if we don't know the timeline. Oh, I think that's what you were saying, right? That Anne actually did provide that. But anyway, regardless, I'm not sure if it's relevant.
Yeah, I mean, we have the information if anybody feels it is, but I don't really, it's not pertinent to it's not happening right away. Could it be a fiscal 24 conversation? Perhaps if we know the timeline, but
Yeah, I just put it out there because people were curious and I was able to find it easily.
Yeah, no, it's good to, I don't want anyone to lose sight of the fact that there is there are changes in the works. It's just, but that will certainly be on our radar as the situation moves forward. All right. We're 10 minutes before 8. I think we have a pretty good reso here. Anything else we want to tweak? Or anything that we might have forgot?
Do we want to vote on this resolution tonight?
Yeah, I think we should because it is time sensitive. And that maybe by putting a resolution before the board, it will actually get the conversation moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, because full board will be before our next meeting anyway, so it would be, I think, a good idea.
And in the event it got referred back to committee for some reason, or if new information came up between now and then obviously we can pull it from the docket if needed. If for some reason it's no longer relevant. But yeah, I think we should move on this one now and then.
Could we just scroll through it so we can see it one full?
Yeah, let's start at the top and just give everybody a little time to kind of read through it.
Yeah, I'll also add that the resolution needs a title, which should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah, it can just be calling for shelter security improvements at New Providence Women's Shelter. It's something along those lines.
Brendan, do you always make more typos when everyone can see you typing?
Maybe not. I think it's more just typing in real time while listening to different people having different ideas, which is fine and good. It's better to hash out this language now than not know what the language is like until full board.
Okay, so can we say calling for shelter
Yeah, calling
security?
for is fine.
I believe we might want to spell out what DHS represents at some point on the top.
Oh, good point. I mean, Department of Homeless Services. I mean, they have so many different things. I mean, we didn't even mention HRA or anything like that in here either.
And as long as we're going to get priggish, I believe CB6, the 6 is supposed to be spelled out.
Yep.
Yeah, and of course, if the office catches any other sort of little formatting things along the lines of what Stu and Anna pointed out, that the office will try to catch those things between now and full board.
Could you make that 17th police precinct just so it's explicit?
Mhm. Yeah, or NYPD, 17th precinct.
In the first, therefore, it should probably be urges that DHSP police, because it's not the police we're urging, but DHS.
Yes.
Let me know if I need to scroll back to somewhere higher up in the resolution, or closer to the top of the page, I should say.
I think I'm good unless anybody else has any feedback. If we're good, would
Yeah.
somebody like to call the question?
Yeah, I was just about to make a motion to support this resolution.
Thanks, Seema. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Stu. And Brendan can call the roll.
Okay. I just realized I forgot to put down my hand. Go figure. So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. Stu Desser.
In favor.
Steve O.
In favor?
Matt Roberts.
In favor.
Ann Sullivan.
In favor.
And Seema Shaw.
In favor.
So with 5 in favor, nobody opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause, the resolution passes.
Excellent. Thank you all. Hopefully this will be the last consecutive meeting on this topic. I know I've been tired of it myself. I'm sure you guys are too, but appreciate the work here. Hopefully we'll get some results the coming months. We may bring it back up when it comes for budget priorities, depending on where things shake out between now and then. But hopefully the message will get through and we'll get some results there. brings us to the chair's report. Just a couple of things here. So next month, what we'll talk about, we're going to switch gears, do something totally different. We're going to talk about the borough president's plan to cut down on scaffolding. So that I know we've talked about it in other formats before, and there are some other resolutions that the board has passed, but we're going to talk specifically about the borough president's plan, which was put forth last week or the week before. Look forward to that. As far as planning goes, next month will bring us to April. I'm going to try to make May the last meeting before the summer, because June would be after the full board, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless there's something pending to have a June meeting that would be passed. Unless we need something passed in exec, and in July, then I prefer to avoid the June committee meeting. So that would leave us just two more. Stu, do you have anything? Question?
When you say scaffolding, you mean these sidewalk bridges, I presume?
Yes.
And
Yes. Sidewalk sheds. Sorry.
So is that a public safety issue?
Mm-hmm. According to the report, it is. Yeah, I mean, we're not talking so much about the dining structures. That's more than transportation and business affairs committee. But we're talking, the plan, I don't know if you were on the borough president's email list, but we circulated to the committee tomorrow about just what the report said and just coming up with different ways. So I want us to look at it. I don't know that we're going to take any major action there. I think a lot of it makes sense, but there's a lot of moving parts, and we may have to get some other opinions in the mix there. So, Steve, do you have your hand up?
I think it makes sense to look at it. As I understand it, the technical term for the scaffolding is called sidewalk sheds, just to make it confusing. And the current laws that surround it is revolved from a public safety incident that happened where a construction repairs to a building did take someone's life when something fell off during construction, and therefore this law that hasn't been observed in several decades just kind of left unchecked. So I think it makes sense for us to take a pass at it. I personally don't know more than what I just mentioned, but it's something I certainly would like to know more of.
Yeah, I think we'll all become much more knowledgeable on the subject. I will say that in addition to that, I know that we do get a lot of quality of life complaints regarding homelessness and encampments and stuff like that, which is often linked to scaffolding, sidewalk sheds. So it just makes everything a little bit more complicated. But so we'll look at that next month. Anne, you have your hand up?
Yeah, this came up in land use sometimes, and I know there is an elected, I want to say Brad Hoylman, but I could be completely wrong about that. Brendan, I don't know if you have a memory here of somebody who, basically, it's really interesting. I did a deep dive into this once, and the economics, the way it works is that people rent sheds, but then it doesn't pay to take them down ever. So they just stay up forever. So you need to change the incentives and, make it so, okay, if you've left this up, and construction is done, you start getting fines for it, right? Or something like that. And the other thing that I think could be really relevant for public safety is a way to do community outreach so that people say, hey, I had, they finished this construction here. How do we get the community to provide the data about what are unintended, structures, things that are not being done. So those are ways where I think we might have an involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look at all of that. We'll talk through, what's the community board's role, and how do we engage the larger community at large, really, to try to push through. Nobody, I mean, they're convenient when it's raining, but you know, I think there's a lot more issues around construction and just, you know, taking them down in a timely manner for a lot of different reasons, including some that you mentioned. So we can look forward to that next month. So with that, I will move to, just another heads up. There are new commanding officers at both the precincts in this district, the 13th, 17th, which will be named hopefully by the time we meet again. Nothing's been named yet, but so hopefully before we break for the summer, we should have a meet and greet with in our committee meetings. So just look out for that. It could be as early as next month, but I think it's more likely for May. But other than that, I will move to items of old or new business. If anybody has any items of old or new business, please raise your hand. Actually, I will mention one thing as far as old business goes. I know there were some new pieces of legislation put forth by Councilmember Powers on the lithium-ion battery safety issue. There's no action. They've already passed the council or moving forward, so there's really no action for us to take. But I did want to just mention that that's still on everybody's radar, in case you haven't seen it in the news, since we did talk about it a few months ago. Other than that, if anyone has any other items of old or new business, please raise your hand. Steve?
More of a question. Have we ever synced up with, I know we coordinate a lot with the police in terms of public safety, but the lithium-ion batteries kind of rings a bell with, have we ever coordinated with the FDNY since they led the investigation? Because for the amount of public safety meetings I've attended, I've never, I don't even know how, what their stance is or seen their presentation.
Yeah, we can certainly invite them. I know they've been working hand in hand with the city council on standards, but I mean, if you want to hear firsthand from them, I'm happy to extend an invitation. So Brendan, I don't know if we have a contact over there, but yeah, if they want to give us maybe a 15-minute presentation on the situation from their perspective, I'm happy to have that as well. Good point, Steve. All right, so we'll see if we get any get any results there. I'll let you guys know. If there's no other items of old or new business, and there's no objection, we can adjourn. All right, meeting's adjourned at 8:04. Thanks everybody, and happy St. Patrick's Day to those who are celebrating, and enjoy spring.